Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at a brand new charge attack in the world of Pokemon Go, and that is Wildbolt Storm. Wildbolt Storm has been given to Thundurus Therian, which makes its return into raids today. Now Wildbolt Storm is an electric type clone of the move Icy Wind, so not only does it give the glassy Thundurus Therian a little bit of extra staying power on the field, but it gives it a much awaited bait move, as previously it was stuck trying to bait with Thunderbolt. So without further ado, let's hop into the matches, and let's check out some Ultra League practice battles featuring Wildbolt Storm, Thundurus Therian. Hopping to the first match, picking up a very tough lead, Poliwrath versus Cresselia. I'm going to throw one counter and then save switch into the Shadow Ampharos. It's a pretty standard team design. Poliwrath, of course, being a fighter, does not like flying types, so we have the two electrics in the back. Opponent is going to land the Moonblast. They try and potentially go for a catch on an undertapped Brutal Swing, but I hold on to my energy, make it to the Focus Blast, and force my opponent to commit a shield. Obstagoon gets a full farm down here, and odds are I'm probably getting either Hyper Beamed or Gunk Shotted, as this Goon has so much energy, and there it is, there is the Gunk Shot. I'm looking for the full farm down here with the Poliwrath. Opponent is going to be firing off energy, and I decide, you know what, I'm actually going to bank this energy, and I'm going to send in Therian Thundurus. Therian Thundurus, now with a 1 Volt Switch head start, opponent is going to send in Cresselia, and that's pretty good news for me. Now keep in mind, this is an Icy Wind clone, so even though Thundurus Therian does have a very high attack stat, this move is not going to do a massive amount of damage just because Icy Wind doesn't hit very hard. But as you can see, coming from a mon that has a very high attack stat, it's still going to do a decent amount. Opponent tries to go for the CMP tie, but instead I go for the extra, so I get a full Volt Switch for free. And now I can choose to massively overfarm here at the back-to-back Wildbolt Storms. The Wildbolt Storm is going to pick up the KO in the back. It's a Wall Rain. I'm farming up, but I'm just shy of the back-to-back moves here. So I am going to be throwing the Wildbolt Storm, waiting, trying to go for the catch. Unfortunately, my catch attempt is not successful. My opponent is still going to fire off energy though. They go for the Icicle Spear, and that's not going to be enough to knock out. I'm going to be firing off this Scald. The Scald is going to connect. I'm looking to make it to another Scald. My opponent is going to throw energy, but I believe this does open up a win con for me, as now they do not have energy, and the Thundurus Therian is able to withstand those Powder Snows, make it to the Wildbolt Storm, and take that game. We've got a mirror lead in the next match, Poliwrath versus Shadow Poliwrath. I save switch into Shadow Ampharos, and my opponent is going to send in Giratina. With Brutal Swing, this is not a terrible matchup for the Shadow Ampharos, and considering that my Thundurus Therian is completely walled by this thing, I'm pretty happy that that's what my opponent decided to bring in. They're going to be firing off this Dragon Claw. The Dragon Claw is going to connect, and I'm firing off the Brutal Swing. The Brutal Swing is going to come very close to knocking out here. My opponent is able to withstand the damage and fire off another Dragon Claw. I decided not to go for switch because I have different ideas. Instead, I'm going for the aggressive Volt Switch down with the Thundurus Therian to get an energy lead. My opponent now going to send in Skeledirge. Ideally, I should have thrown the Wildbolt Storm as soon as I got it, as that would have been perfect timing. But as you can see, that does quite a lot of neutral damage. So maybe I did undersell it a little bit when going up against a mon like Cresselia, but for an Icy Wind clone neutrally to be doing this much is pretty nice. I'm going to be shielding up as my opponent fires off the Disarming Voice. I continue to farm, they're firing off energy, and I'm double shielding and looking for a farm down. They have to switch here or I will get the farm down. They stay in, but the Volt Switch is going to pick up the KO. Back in comes my opponent's Poliwrath. This will do a massive amount of damage as it's super effective onto a Shadow, so they're forced to shield, and now I can bring in my own Poliwrath, but my opponent comes into this matchup having already taken damage and already being debuffed, so I should have the upper hand. I'm going to go for the Scald. Even if it doesn't get the debuff, it's going to do some nice chip damage here. The Scald connects. I don't get lucky with the debuff, but this game should still be a win. My opponent is going to be firing off their energy here. They go for the Scald. The Scald connects. It does get the debuff, but I should still be winning here. I fire off the Icy Wind. That takes the opponent to 1 HP, and 1 counter from my Poliwrath takes the game. Picking up a positive lead in the next match, Poliwrath into Swampert. Incredibly happy to see the Swampert here, and even happier that they're deciding to stay in. I'm farming up, and I'm going for the Scald right away, but of course I will lose charge attack priority. The fact that they're staying in this losing matchup makes me feel like my Poliwrath has value in the back, so I will expend a shield and fire off the Scald. The Scald is going to connect. Again, I do not get lucky with the attack drop. My opponent fully staying in here. They make it to a charge move, but this is only going to be a Hydro Cannon, so I can very comfortably tank this. Whatever they send in here, I'm going to look to pivot out because I'm expecting the Poliwrath will have value in the back. So I send in the Ampharos. Opponent is going to be firing off their energy here. It is going to be the Moonblast. That does quite a lot of damage, but I should be able to make 2 Brutal Swings before my opponent is able to make their next move. Brutal Swing number 1 does get shielded. I make it to Brutal Swing number 2, putting pressure on that final shield. At this point, I'm just going to let the Ampharos go, as I do want to save a shield for my pretty glassy second electric type in the back, being the Thundurus Therian. The Grass Knot will pick up the KO. In comes the Thundurus. Thundurus farming up energy. Opponent tries to go for the Wildbolt Storm catch onto the Magnezone. They are unsuccessful, and it's Focus Blast time. Goodbye, Magnezone. Back in comes the Cresselia. Cresselia firing off energy. I shield up as they go for the Moonblast. I should be able to make it to the Wildbolt Storm, and this is going to do some solid chip damage and, of course, get the debuff onto my opponent. Wildbolt Storm connects into the combo play with the Scald from the Poliwrath, and this should be game over here. The Scald, oh, we do see Cresselia surviving on 1 HP, but at this point, they know that the game is over, so they end up 0 bubbling the Moonblast, and that's a good game. We see another mirror in the next match, Poliwrath versus Poliwrath. I save switch into Shadow Ampharos. Opponent sends out XL level 50 Unova Stunfisk. Oh my goodness, this is absolutely awful for me. I land the Focus Blast, but they're able to tank that no problem. Ufisk has a ton of HP. They go for the Mud Bomb. I'm hoping that I can make the Brutal Swing, but watch this. I faint just as I make it to the move. I send in the Poliwrath, but I'm still going to be taking super effective damage here. So this has gone from a very even lead matchup, Poliwrath versus Poliwrath, into an absolute nightmare very quickly. The Discharge is going to connect. I'm just going for the Icy Wind as soon as I get it. I need to get rid of the Ufisk, and then hopefully, hope against hope, that Thundurus Therian can do well in the back. In comes Thundurus in the back. It's Registeel, and this surprisingly seems playable. I build up to the Focus Blast. I'm baiting with the Wildbolt Storm here. The Wildbolt Storm bait does get shielded, and of course that will come with the guaranteed attack drop. I'm going to be shielding up as my opponent fires off the Zap Cannon. The Zap Cannon does not debuff. I have a call to make. Do I bait? Do I nuke? I'm full sending it, going for the Focus Blast, but the opponent double shields. That's extremely unfortunate for me. They're firing off more energy, and the switch clocks will be up soon. Zap Cannon number 2 forces the final shield. I continue to farm. Opponent tries to go for the Focus Blast catch. I switch into my own Poliwrath, but now it's my turn to be unable to catch. I send back in the Thundurus, fired off the Wildbolt Storm. That KOs from that health range. Back in comes the Registeel, but we get outpaced by 1 or 2 turns, and the Zap Cannon does mean game over. An incredibly close game. Tough lead in the next match, Poliwrath into Weezing. I'm going to save switch into the Ampharos. My energy is walled here, so I'm just going to keep farming and hope they switch out, and switch out they do as they send in Greedent. My Focus Blast this time is going to connect, and Greedent gets KO'd without even throwing a charge move. That is incredibly nice for me. Opponent, are they going to be sending back in the Weezing? No, they send in Guzzlord. Guzzlord farming up, and Guzzlord is firing off energy. I'm going to no shield. They have to crunch if they want a KO here, because if they go for the Dragon Claw, thanks to having an amazing rank Shadow Swampert, sorry, a Shadow Ampharos, not a Shadow Swampert, I'm able to make it to the Focus Blast and grab that shield. I don't know why I was still thinking about Swampert from that previous match. Anyways, that is definitely a Shadow Ampharos. I'm farming up, and I'm firing off the Icy Wind. This Icy Wind, I believe, should be enough to KO. It barely does not. I switch, anticipating my opponent to switch as well, but instead, I end up catching a Dragon Claw, and that is actually really bad news for me. They do have a ton of energy on the Weezing, and now I've put myself in a range where a Play Rough would absolutely knock out. Although, to be fair, it is a Thundurus Therian. Thundurus Therian probably going to get knocked out by most moves anyway. I'm able to grab the final shield with the Wildbolt Storm, and I decide to commit my final shield as well. It's going to be a race, Wildbolt Storm versus Play Rough, and I make it to the Wildbolt Storm. Is this going to be enough to knock out? Wildbolt Storm does pick up the KO. We Volt Switch down the Guzzlord and take the game. Great lead in the next match. Poliwrath into Shadow, Alolan Sandslash. Opponent save switches into their own Poliwrath. I'm going to stay in here, farm up energy, wait for them to throw their energy, and then I'm going to send in Therian Thundurus. They go for the Icy Wind. I send in the Thundurus. These Volt switches are tearing through the Poliwrath, and I'm firing off the Wildbolt Storm. As we've seen, this will easily KO from here. The opponent is going to commit the shield, and now we get to see the battle of the debuffers here. I'm debuffing them with Wildbolt Storm, and they're debuffing right back with Icy Wind. I'm firing off another Wildbolt Storm. Is my opponent willing to shield this as well? No, they are going to let it go. They can now send in the Sandslash. Sandslash farming up quite a bit of energy here, not going to let me make it to a move as they fire off the Ice Punch, which is massive overkill and will pick up the KO. I send in the Poliwrath. In the back, it's Tentacruel, and it's very unfortunate rock, paper, scissors alignment here for my opponent, where they were double weak to electric in the back, and I had double electric. I don't even need to shield the Ampharos at this point. I know that I'm able to tank a Scald, and not only can I tank a Scald, but I can make it to another Brutal Swing. This should force the final shield, and I have energy stored on the Poliwrath from earlier. So I can send back in the Poliwrath, go for the Scald, and unfortunately for my opponent, all that's left is a Sandslash, and I have a counter user, and I'm able to make it to the Scald. I do lose charge attack priority, but I still have that shield remaining, so I can shield up the Drill Run, and the Scald is going to mean game over. We see a Core Breaker on the lead in the next match, Poliwrath into Venusaur. I save switch into Shadow Ampharos, but this is really not a good spot to be in for me. I'm firing off the Brutal Swing. I'm hoping my opponent is going to switch out here, because obviously I would love to align it onto Thundurus Therian, but unfortunately they're staying in. They go for the Frenzy Plant. That does massive damage, but again the Ampharos IVs coming in clutch as I'm able to make it to the last second Brutal Swing and get my opponent low. This is a bit awkward. I don't have great fast move pressure into this Pokemon. I'm going to send in the Thundurus. At this point, I was expecting they probably made it to the Sludge Bomb. So for science, I no shield, and look at the damage. They send in Guzzlord. I bring in Poliwrath, and it's an Ampharos in the back. So unfortunately, this is probably just going to be a loss, as the pacing of Ampharos is just absolutely terrific, and they're running Thunder Punch as well. So yeah, I'm still going to try and play my way out of this, but I really don't see a win con. I can fire off Icy Winds, grab shields from my opponent, but the pacing on Ampharos is just way better than Poliwrath. They're already at another Thunder Punch. I'm not even at my second move. I'm able to make it to the Icy Wind, but my opponent is easily going to be able to make it to a Thunder Punch and pick up a KO. And unfortunately, I don't think I can get it low enough that I can Volt Switch down with the Thundurus. That would be the win con, of course, trying to Volt Switch down and then Focus Blast here, but they send in the Guzzlord, and I do not get to the Focus Blast. Hopping into the final match, leading Poliwrath into Shadow Swampert. Opponent save switches into their own Poliwrath, and this time I decided to play it a little differently. Last time, I did stay in, tank and move and switch, and that's probably the better way to play it, as now I'm behind on energy. Even though these Volt Switches are doing a ton of damage, being down energy here does mean that Poliwrath will be able to force shields from me. I fire off the Wildbolt Storm on charge attack priority, and I'm going to be shielding up. I'm perfectly fine with Volt switching down here. I'm down a shield, but I leave with a lot of energy. Granted, this energy is 2 stages debuffed thanks to the Icy Winds. They send in the Swampert, and I'm going for the Wildbolt Storm. I want to make sure that I can survive these mud shots long enough to get to the Focus Blast. Now keep in mind, this Focus Blast has been double debuffed by Icy Winds, and it still almost gets the KO. I try and snipe with a counter from the Poliwrath. In the back, opponent has a level 50 Mantine. Incredibly cool spice from the opponent. Very unfortunate choice of Pokemon considering I have double electric in the back, but a very, very cool Pokemon nevertheless. I'm farming up and I'm firing off another Icy Wind. This damage is starting to add up onto the Mantine. Mantine shielding up, looking to protect itself as it's going to massively overfarm and fire off another Aerial Ace. This Aerial Ace is going to connect. Poliwrath is going to get farmed down. I'm going to send in the Ampharos. The thing I have to watch for is a potential combo play with the Swampert. The Swampert shouldn't have an Earthquake banked, but it's close. I'm farming up. Opponent sends in the Swampert. I try and get the catch. I was stuck in the Volt Switch, but the Volt Switch KOs the Swampert. And despite a very scary endgame, we're able to take the win. All in all, Wildbolt Storm is a really nice addition to the moveset of Thundurus Therian. Honestly, it's tough to find a Pokemon that wouldn't be improved by giving it a clone of the move Icy Wind, and Thundurus Therian, of course, is no exception. Not having to bait with Thunderbolt and having a move that can debuff the opponent to allow you to stay on the field longer is a definite plus. However, there are some very real issues that remain with using Thundurus Therian. Specifically, as I mentioned, the lack of bulk remains an issue, and Volt Switch, while it is a pretty decent fast move, does end up feeling a little bit clunky. We have seen other Pokemon, of course, like even on this team, Shadow Ampharos, have some very nice success with it, but Ampharos typically ended up having a lot better stats. So for Thundurus Therian, now that it has Wildbolt Storm, I could definitely see it having a little increased play when it comes to the Master League. In the Ultra League, we're probably not going to see it a whole lot just because there are already some very strong electric types, like the aforementioned Ampharos, but it is definitely an improvement. But as far as Thundurus Therian goes, there is definitely additional improvements that it needs. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And a special thank you as always to our members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is sincerely appreciated, so thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.